Hey everybody, thank you for listening to Filling in the Gaps. Be sure to check out our example readings with animation at our Filling in the Gaps YouTube channel. From there, you can follow us on our social media pages to get updates on show releases and anything special we may be doing. Just sit back and enjoy the show. Should be a lot of fun. Thanks again.
All right, everybody. Well, welcome out to Filling in the Gaps. Filling in the Gaps is going to be a podcast where myself and my friend Cameron. Cameron, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Cameron. I'm introducing myself.
Perfect. And my name is Rich. We're just two friends who met playing video games and realized we have a intense love for telling stories and specifically playing tabletop role-playing games. I'm a huge fan of Dungeons & Dragons. I think that's where, Cam, is that where you got your start? Is Dungeons & Dragons?
Yeah, actually the starter kit. And I was essentially forcing four unwilling participants to join me in this endeavor, and I have been hooked ever since. So
yeah. And now Cam's actually writing his own tabletop game called The West, which is awesome. But we realized that every time we got together, we loved bouncing ideas off each other. And we both realized, because we really loved the idea of playing D&D, and our friends didn't quite as much, that we would have to fill the role of being the game master or the dungeon master. So a lot of times, like you've probably realized if you're listening to us, that means even on weeks where you're not feeling the story or you don't know what to do, you do it. Whether it's for your friends or for the fun of it, you have that story ready. Now, Filling in the Gaps is birthed out of this idea that we want to help you fill in the gaps on your game night. We want to give you some ideas that you can take to the table and hopefully run with. And the way we're going to do that and give that to you is we are going to have a random theme and a random scenario every week that we roll on. And when we roll for those random scenarios using our classic tried and true D20s, we are going to fill in the gaps. Now, one week we could be talking about a space theme, and the scenario could be rigging an election. Another week we could be in a rainforest, in a fighting tournament. Another week we could be in the apocalypse trying to, infiltrate a compound. But every single week, it won't be scripted. It'll be us saying, what would it look like if these two things were mashed together? And I hope you guys have as much fun listening as we do talking. Cam, do you want to walk them through kind of the stepping stones of an episode real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the key component behind it all is we're going to have fun with it. Obviously, this is for those of you that haven't necessarily had a chance to dive into that whole entire storytelling structure. And so we have sort of built ourselves an itinerary of sorts that allows for us to go through each of those steps and really define each of those key components to what it is about storytelling. So first and foremost, we're going to define the theme itself. We're going to go into it about what does this theme mean to you as the storyteller? What does it mean to your players? We'll even use examples of pop culture at times and try to find out, where those things have lined up in the past. Then we're going to jump into world building. We're going to create world components, places that the players can sort of orient themselves in and allow for themselves to dive themselves deeper into this world. World building is a key component to everything that we do here. Creating a skeleton for the story is absolutely critical for what we're doing for moving forward. After that, we're going to start with the beginning, find ourselves at climactic points throughout the story, get to the middle, hit another climax, and then finally end the story. We're going to even set up our tone and things like that. Then we're going to start fleshing out the plot, creating NPCs, building mechanics for this world, and maybe any of these ideas you can pick and choose from us, steal it. That's what we're here for, We are here to provide as much help as we can for those other storytellers in the world, and then we're going to sort of wrap it up at the end there. But that's sort of the roadmap, I'd say, Rich. So
yeah, exactly. Short, sweet, to the point. And like Cam said, we're just having fun, so feel free to steal these ideas. We're not going to be offended if we find out that you are somewhere out in Minnesota playing in your basement and you're using our ideas. That's what we want. So it's going to be so much fun. Cam,
I will say this before. I just want to put up a disclaimer. If we do find out that there are ideas and they do make a lot of money, then then we'll have a lot of problems with it, and we'll have to go through legal process and all that kind of stuff. But no big deal,
exactly.
Rich.
Yeah, no big deal. No big deal.
Yeah, that obviously won't happen. But if it does,
at least it won't happen on episode 1. So you're safe.
No, it will not.
You're safe for a little while.
Yes, exactly. But Rich, shall we roll?
I think we shall. Now I'm going to be rolling for the scenarios today.
Yes.
Sweet. I'm going to get my classic D20 here.
And I will be rolling for the themes. So here we go.
Ooh, I got a 10.
Okay. And I got a 3. So our theme starts in a school, which is interesting. And 10.
And that school is going to be haunted.
Oh, man.
No lie. It is weird how stuff turns out for us. Because literally before this episode started, Cam was reading this quote by R.L. Stine that said, like, I always start a story before I start writing it. I always have my end in mind. And of course, we would have, talking about R.L. Stine, we'd have a haunted school, which is just so R.L. Stine. I love it, though.
Yeah, we're about to do a pick your own adventure kind of story right now. This should be fun. Turn to page 76 to define your theme. I think that's where we need to start, actually. So,
all right, let me get to page 76. I chose the flashlight, so.
Okay, so Rich, what does this mean to you in terms of like how do you view the haunted school? What is the first thing that sort of pops in your mind right away?
First thing for me, man, is like I can remember as a kid reading this R.L. Stine book, and the kids were going through this school, and it was a choose your own story adventure, and maybe it's the reason why I like D&D so much. But there was this monster in the school that was always just like right behind them. Like they could see it coming, they'd see it down a hallway, and there was that impending sense of like, if this thing catches us, like we're going to be in trouble. Which I'm not going to lie, I feel like that's a very hard thing to do in D&D. Depending on who your players are, is give them a big scary thing and then not go, bring it on. We can handle it. Right.
No, 100%. So being in the world, I actually have a real world example because I work in schools late at night. And I have to tell you, man, it is frightening when you look down a hallway. I always have this like feeling that when I turn the corner, I'm going to see like 2 little girls just standing at the end of the hallway singing or something like that. It's always a frightening feeling to me. And the older the school, the more that feeling just starts to just stick me right in the heart. Yep. So it's that stomach dropping sort of moment. So maybe for the theme and more or less the tone of this whole thing, what if there was like in a sense like a horror or more or less like a supernatural type of you thought it was there, but it wasn't, and you're consistently tricking your players in that regard. So would that be sort of how the theme could sort of start finding its way in that regard?
Ooh, I like the idea of tricking, especially because then it's like, because you're in a school, you could have, especially if we're going off like a D&D setting, but you could do this for a sci-fi setting, for a Starfinder setting, whatever setting. Yeah. There's so many ways where you could use like ghosts. Like you walk into a classroom and you walk in and the classroom isn't this decrepit room full of skeletons. It's this like lively classroom and the teacher's like having the students sit down. And like you're kind of walking around there surreally as these like students are going through class, and then the teacher's like, reciting this like monologue, or maybe, this could be even better, the teacher's like reading attendance. The teacher's going through attendance, and all of the kids are like saying their names, and then the teacher says the player character's name.
Boom.
And the player character's like, what? And then like he looks at the kids, and all the kids are just like staring at them.
Yes.
And it's just like, oh crap, I didn't think they saw me.
Here it is.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful start to it. So we've sort of defined the theme, right? You have that picture in your mind, I'd say, right? so now, in terms of world building itself, this is where we can create these ideas of things that sort of stick really hard in our players' minds.
Yep.
So, to me, I view it as like the old 2-story high school type of brick wall outside, bunch of windows, emergency exit chutes on the outside. But what other types of schools would we incorporate? Are there, like, let's say we're doing a D&D campaign, right? It doesn't have the quintessential school like we have. What could they do?
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah, I guess in medieval settings you wouldn't have, if they had a school, man, it would be like almost just a one-room thing. Almost like old school one-room schoolhouse. You could do like a magic school, like Harry Potter. Yes. Yeah. So you could do something like that. Maybe even you're probably going to have a spellcaster of some sorts in your group. So that could even be that maybe they get summoned back to this school where they learned everything. And there's this, like, they get there and there's this whole wing of the school now that's just deserted. Or maybe maybe it's intro session. And it's like you're being sent to this old abandoned school.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's like this. Like, I go, you can apply this in so many different ways, right? It's just a place of learning, more or less, right? So It's a university. It could be it could be Hogwarts. It could be in the Old West. It could be a schoolyard and like small little single room school buildings, all sort of bunched together in the small area. But it can transition itself through multiple themes. I even think of like a game like Fallout, right, where you're in this like trapped, closed-in environment when you're inside of the vaults, but they've still got school type of things going on right there. Well, now you explore those types of worlds within that. So
exactly, this could even be like you said, a university. It could be a laboratory where you have like these researchers. If you want to get a little bit more eldritch with it, you could have these researchers tangling with the unknown. Or researching with this cell that fell on the planet and now it's morphed and changed everything.
Right.
But
I really like what you said earlier about entering a world that where it's this gloomy. Here's how I picture it, Rich, and bear with me. But I picture this like dark, almost like a green gray tonal type of feel to it, hallway with cobwebs and everything, and then you open a door into a room, maybe that's where they were told to go, or maybe they found that that's where they could find like the best items or whatever it may be. And then when you open the room, it's this lively classroom, like you say. And I like the idea of closing the door, and then as the players turn around, maybe if they're afraid or they look to exit, as either the door's gone, or B, the door's still there, but when they go back through the door, they're within this existing school of ghost children and stuff like this. Like it's now become this lively school that's filled to the brim with these trapped souls or something like that.
Yep. I like that. Now, real quick, before we go too far, I want to go back to something you mentioned with world building, is what does make up, what are key components of a school or a university that we want to make sure are something we're considering when even building this adventure. You had mentioned a 2-story, emergency chutes, classrooms. Yeah. What are some other, like, I don't want to say cliche, but go-to rooms in a schoolyard? For instance, you got that creepy statue out front surrounded by like overgrown bushes and like the school's name.
Yes. The place has to be called an institute of sorts. It has to be, because it's just...
Institute's a creepy word.
It's such a creepy word.
I've heard that if you want something to sound futuristic, you say it's made out of a polymer. And I think if you want something to sound creepy, you call it an institute.
What about a Polymer Institute? What is that?
Oh gosh, it's a creepy futuristic thing.
Yeah, that's what that is. What about this? You tap into these like internal fears, the principal's office, or something like the main dean, the power figure,
the headmaster.
The headmaster is a huge one. That's actually like the best terminology we could possibly use. Creating those little rooms that represent those people, though, is something. But what about like the basement of the school, the boiler room, the flooded basement?
Yes.
The creaky basketball court.
Room? Oh, that's even better.
Yeah.
But basketball court, that's perfect. I'm trying to think of some other ones. The roof, like, especially because if it's a 2-story, like sometimes,
I picture a flat roof 100%.
Oh yeah, flat roof. You got to have something up there. Maybe a few different like ways to get around.
The cafeteria.
Ooh, got the cafeteria.
The lunch lady.
Oh, speaking of cafeteria, library.
Oh, the library. How did we forget that?
How do you forget that? And then
we're rookies, man.
I know,
This is the first episode. We got to get better at this, man.
Now, if you're looking more at like a university and less of like a schoolroom, you've got like research chamber. You could have like a medical ward. I like the idea of like if you're doing like a university of having like the back to tank looking tube, and it's got to be broken, of course.
Yeah.
And then just all this stuff around it, surrounding it, looking just extra creepy.
Yeah, think about the extracurricular activities at a university type of thing, too. So your sporting events, your large stadiums, those get to be introduced into this world as well. They could be great platforms for your players to go back to. Maybe you set the stage early on. You show them a field with a bunch of, maybe a track and field, you know what I'm talking about, with javelins and pole vaulting and things like that. Mm-hmm. You show them that early and give them the ability maybe to go back later, but with other things available to them there. You know what I mean?
I dig it. Oh, I'm excited for this. So are we creating our skeleton now?
Actually, I'd like for you to start that off. Sort of tell me how you would approach it. Would we go down that path that we already sort of talked about? Would it be actually, how do we get to where we were talking about earlier with that lively classroom? I really like that idea.
Well, I feel like that's something we could do, but I also want to pay homage. If we're going to talk about R.L. Stein, we got to pay homage to the guy. So what do we think is the end? What is the end result of this session? What are the players going there for? Is there an artifact, or are they just there to cleanse this thing and like send these souls on their way?
I think that you could have a sort of a thing where they are prompted with a powerful artifact, right? Like a book, especially out of the library or something like that. But in the time that they're there, they're presented with this moral choice of trying to find ways to maybe set these souls free and letting those, maybe the children that were in that school or whatever it may be, something that's been trapped behind, maybe let them help that along as well and create sort of like almost like a secondary side quest. Just like a piece of candy moment for them, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I really like the idea of like a tome or a book of some sort.
I love the idea of a book.
Scholarly, you know what I mean? And it's just it's very different than the rest of the books, and they find that, and this is maybe something that they go searching for that will help them defeat something else in a different campaign or a portion of a campaign that they're in.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
One thing about it, too, if you want to, that the headmaster in this school is probably going to be the bad guy unless you want to do some kind of twist. So what is the worst, what is something that just instills instant hate in someone? It's like when you do something to kids. So you have this headmaster, or you have this teacher who was brought in, and they have this book that they brought with them, and slowly they're beginning to like do these things to the school that turn it into this thing, or accidentally turns into this thing. And just thinking through, man, I wish I had my Dungeon Master's Guide with me. But there's this book I gave to my players. There's the Book of Vile Evil Darkness, which might be a bit too extreme, but who knows? There's other books that like have to deal with like Vecna, where like they
you're gonna have to tell me about Vecna. I don't know anything about Vecna.
Yeah, where like it steals like their thoughts.
Oh wow, that's actually incredibly good.
You could even do, if you want to think about what's an undead ghost creating villain, you could do something with a Lich, where
Yeah.
I think liches have to like feed off the soul energy. So you could do something where this lich is like, I'm going to infiltrate the school.
I'm telling you right now, this is what it is right here. There's a lich within the school that uses the book of Vecna, as you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they coerce children and things like that to this school,
Mm-hmm.
and they're feeding off of these kids, and these kids have, we could make it brutal in a way, and they could either die or they could just be trapped, and maybe the players have learned about the school of Vecna, but they don't know about what's actually happening there.
Yep.
The book of Vecna, and then they find out that this is a far more important thing to stop this fiend from taking away the lives of these kids or something like that. What do you think about that?
No, I love it. Like, come on, liches are such good villains. I love them.
They are.
I do have a soft spot for liches and for Vecna.
Yeah.
But what about this too? With this
Okay.
school, I feel the more we talk about it, it's got to be a private school. It's got to be like, we've sent our son to this private school. We get letters still from him. Thinking of like, I remember, I know I talk about Firefly a lot, but in Firefly, where the one brother, the one brother of the sister who's experimented on, it's like, no, I can see in these letters that things are wrong.
Right.
But you just can't see it. I like the idea, maybe even a cool tie-in. If the end is they're defeating these lich, a cool tie-in could be that one of your players went to this school, or that one of your players' siblings went to this school.
Gotcha.
And this is you've gotten a letter, or maybe you just haven't heard from them in a while. Maybe your sibling gets back. And is like, hey, we've got to go back there. I especially like the idea of a player character going to the school when they were young.
Yes.
Which you could tie into like a noble background or something.
Absolutely.
And then, because then you could play off like the whole like, well, who are people that your character hated?
And correct me if I'm wrong, but liches can take a physical form that's attractive and like, if we're just speaking from a D&D perspective, they can actually appear to be humanoid in a way, right?
They can. I think there's a spell. There's a spell they can cast which makes their body look not gross.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
But it's
man. If I had someone to tell me that, I'd feel like $1 million.
Seriously.
Hey, you look not gross. Well, you know what? I really appreciate the kind words you've been using for me lately.
I've been casting spells all day.
I put a lot of work into this.
I'm flipping to Lich right now in my monster manual.
So while you're doing that, so the end is to find the book of Vecna. We'll roll with that, right? Mm-hmm. And now we can work on finding things backwards of how we can trick our players. Maybe introducing characters that seem imposing and scary, but are actually on their side. I really love the idea of doing that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Sort of the look this way and look the other. Maybe the football coach type of, or sporting coach type of character is this imposing ghost figure type, but in reality, they're actually the ones trying to help out, or they're unbeknownst to them, this is happening, but then they become wise to it or something like that. So how do you start this, though? How do you begin this process?
Well, like I said before, I think if we have a background we can tie this thing into, a letter that you get from a sibling or a cousin. Maybe it's a school you went to and you're being, summoned back to it, because that could be something too. Is what's a great way to, let's just have to feed off of these souls. What's a great way to attract people? Hey, we're having this day. Why don't you come see your student? Why don't you come see your cousin?
Gotcha.
They're asking for you to be here, or something happened. Come on down.
Right.
So
and it could even be it could be like, wow, I got a letter from the school about my cousin, but I haven't seen my cousin in 10 years. Are they still at and it's a curiosity thing?
Yeah.
Could it be something like that too?
Yep. No, I think that's perfect. I mean, if you don't have something like that, you could always do. I feel like this is a little bit weaker because character motivation is a big thing for me as a player, and I know it is for you too from hearing you talk about it. So I hate just the idea of like, hey, Book of Vecna's at this school, you should go check it out. Because then it's really easy for you to be going through the game and the players to be like, why are we here? Like,
Yes.
why am I doing
no,
this?
I need vested. I've always thought that as players, they need a reason. They need a why.
Yep.
And we've talked about this before many a times, but a why is such an important thing when it comes to storytelling. And so, if you can incorporate their backstories, not only does it give the story some more validity and even some more realism, but it makes them feel more wanted in their own game.
Exactly. Yep.
And they go, man, he's putting in the work to really focus on my character and give me this moment. This is a lot of fun to me. So I absolutely think that you can't just have a fetch quest, because how much do we all hate fetch quests in games?
So bad. So bad.
You know what I mean?
It just becomes swing sword until done.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah, exactly.
Here's something from my sessions that my characters ended up loving, and it could be if you wanted to like take your time to instill this. First off, I think we can all acknowledge that as dungeon masters, every now and again, you just gotta destroy a city. Like, you just get it in your skin, and you're like, you know what, this city's burning today. Especially if you're looking for character motivation, just burn a city down, especially one that's important to the players.
You got to get it out of your system. You got to get it out of your system
exactly.
in this way.
Exactly.
Otherwise, because otherwise you got to burn down a real city. So.
Yeah, you don't want to do that, and you don't want to TPK. So, but I have this organization in my world called the it's just called like the Orphans. And the orphans have, the Orphan King, and it kind of functions as a more minor league thieves guild. So, because, no one pays attention to the orphans. No one pays attention to, these kids on the street, but they're paying attention. And they're collecting information, and they're picking pockets. So people in the know can get information for them. The Orphan King himself can be, and usually is, an 18-year-old. But then he's kicked out once he turns 19.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's a cool concept.
Yep. So that way, like, you always connect them to an orphan when they're young, and then you bring it back later, and the orphan's like, I'm the king now. Anyway, so you could introduce this organization, and then later on, if you destroy a city, or maybe you have this generous benefactor who comes in, and they're like, hey, I want to help out the orphans of this city. I want to go. It could even just be that you have this rich guy come into town, elaborate red robe. He comes in and he says, you know what? I want to go ahead and help out all the orphans of this town. Make sure your players have interacted with orphans, which is honestly really fun, because the orphans, you have them steal a player's item or steal some money. They chase them down through the streets, this endearing thing. Hey, because usually it ends with one of two things: either you
murder of the orphans.
Either
most
you
of the time.
murder the orphan, or hopefully your players have that spot where they're like, well, you know what? Let me buy you some food. Let me put you up for the night. So then, a few days later, here comes this guy. I want to go ahead and send all the orphans to school. Immediately,
and that's your Lich.
Exactly. Immediately, all the players are thinking like either they're dumb as nails and they're like, okay, cool, or they're like, this seems a little suspicious.
Right.
So that could be the beginning. Now, the beginning doesn't mean that leads right into Act 1 or that introduction climax. That could be something.
But that plants the seed.
Exactly. That's something you could do like 2 or 3 sessions before this. You could have a whole nother adventure happen. And then
things have become set up, and that's how it goes from there.
Exactly. Then you get a letter from your friend the orphan who stole 2 gold pieces from you, and you're like, oh yeah, I wonder how that kid's doing.
Oh, callbacks are huge. I mean, I use wrestling because it's a long form storytelling that I really enjoy. Yeah. But callbacks are a component of their storytelling that is done better than any other medium. They incite this vigor out of their crowd where they're just like, oh my god, that person's back, I love them so much.
Yep.
And so if you had this fun little orphan that was maybe brought out a bunch of laughs out of the party or something like that, they're going to want to go see him.
Dude, the worst thing too could be if maybe instead of somebody coming and even saying like, I'd like to take this orphan to school, if somebody mentions this school and the players are like, we could scrape together 100 gold pieces and send this orphan off to a nice school.
Oh yes, I love it. Oh yep, that's it right there.
Yep.
So the Lich mentions the school, and it's inconspicuous to them because the Lich is just like, they're just sowing the seeds. They're just hoping some of the plants grow.
Yep.
And then in the player's case, they say, wait, we can help him out. Now look, as a DM, you can go multiple directions, right? You don't have to go down that path.
Exactly.
And if that path doesn't present itself, don't force it. Don't force it.
Also true.
But if it does happen, you have created a wonderful moment for absolute gut-wrenching like guilt in your players.
Yep.
And they have to atone for it.
Exactly.
They have to.
Yep.
Yeah. So the climax of Act 1. So we've gotten the beginning and we've gotten our end, right? The end is sort of ridding this school of the Lich, and on top of that, taking the Book of Vecna. The climax, Act 1, is I always like to introduce a sort of the big bad as I still want them to be ambiguous in terms of the player's idea towards this person.
Gotcha.
But maybe at that time they're probably already wise to it. But does your climax always need to be a battle? What other ways could you do a climax?
For this climax, you could do... first off, I think when they get to the school, it's already creepy. So they already feel bad initially going in. There's that sense of urgency because they're like, oh, shoot. This isn't like it is in the brochure. So they're running in, and then you have that moment where maybe through, like you were saying, some doors opening and closing, some footsteps behind them. Maybe the first climax could be that classroom scene where it's not necessarily a combat. It's just that like, oh shoot moment of like, what's going on here?
What have we done? Mm-hmm. And they see the boy that they put in their class, and he's this young boy, and they see the class, and they're looking around the children, and then they look into his eyes, and it's blank.
Yep.
And it's nothing like the vibrant kid that they saw out on the streets.
Yep. Now I think really good, because we're talking haunting. So let me look at ghosts real quick in the player's handbook, because I had an idea the other day for doing something with a ghost, and I didn't end up doing it. So first off, we should also mention, if we're talking, Dungeons and Dragons or whatever game, ghosts. Well, a Lich is like insanely difficult. So this is like a big bad. So this could be something that if you want to do a full power Lich, it could be something later on for like higher level adventurers. However, I think ideally this session feels most fun with like low power parties.
Yes.
So we'll just have to find some way later on of having those moments where the Lich can be sniped somehow, so he's not operating at full power.
And we'll hit that while you're looking up ghosts and stuff. We'll hit that with building mechanics for the world, because you don't always have to be the strongest character. You just have to accomplish certain things at times that can eliminate very strong characters. Because sword and shield doesn't always win the war, but a signing of a piece of paper might just do the trick at the same time. And once we get finished with the skeleton, which we're almost there, then we'll jump into sort of filling out the plot, which we've already hit a lot on as well, which is really, really cool. But we'll be able to hit set pieces, which I really love. I'm a big set piece guy.
Yep.
I don't know about you.
Yep.
But set pieces are fun.
So this might be more mechanics, but I feel like this could... Okay, I'll just make a note of this, and we can come back once we start fleshing out the story more.
Okay, I got you.
But ghosts have some cool abilities, so we'll come back to that later.
I got you. So let's we got the beginning of getting the orphans to that school. Climax Act 1 is the realization of what these guys have done. Climax Act 2, in my mind, it could be multiple sessions in between that, right?
Yep.
But Climax Act 2 could be the moment where they cleanse the school, and this is the unveiling of this like horrifying lich
Yep.
sort of type of thing. What do you do in the midpoint? We're in between those climaxes as you've hit one peak of your story. In this valley, what are you doing there as a DM for you?
Well, I feel like the midpoint has to be, because it's the build-up. The midpoint is still that build-up of tension. So I feel like it has to be where you're gaining what you need to accomplish what you want to do. Which, I mean, actually, that kind of ties in. Me and you talk a lot about the Harmon Circle.
Right.
Which, if you are an aspiring storyteller, look up the Harmon Circle. Dan Harmon is a genius, but his story goes through like 8 steps that talk about really 8 steps to every story. So I'm just going to read through these real quick. The 8 steps are a character is in a zone of comfort is the first step. They find out that they want something. They enter an unfamiliar situation and they adapt to it. Then they get what they wanted, what they came for, but they have to pay a heavy price for it. Then they return back to a familiar situation, but they've changed in the meantime. I feel like for me, the midpoint of the story, they've already entered into the school. I think the midpoint is them adapting to it to get what they want. And for me, I love the idea of Slenderman style notes because the kids want out. But these kids aren't philosophers. They're not professors. They're not, they're not at the Lich's level of intelligence. So you're going through, and as you're trying to chase down these kids, who are leaving notes for you, and they're running from whatever's chasing you as well. You're picking up little pieces of like, check this room, or he doesn't like this.
And this is to me a great way to introduce fun side supplementary characters.
Yep.
Nope. Like the lunch
true.
lady.
Yep.
And they could be bad and good. But these are characters that can help you, they can hurt you. These are just little events that can pop up and provide you even more information if the players are feeling the desire to explore even more. You can reward them with those fun moments like that, and so that's you defining the midpoint in that way was huge, and maybe that's where a lot of the Harmon Circle can come into play. Is when you lose where you are in that storytelling moment. Where do you fit in that circle, and then find yourself there?
Exactly.
And when you define that, it was awesome. It clicked for me so much right there.
Yep.
That was really, really good, man.
Perfect.
I like that a lot.
Yep, it was all me. Definitely not Dan Harmon at all.
No, definitely not. Actually, you have written, 14 books?
Just about. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sort of impressed, man. I had a hard enough time writing an email, so this morning to you. So let's do this then. We've sort of created a really, really fleshed out skeleton. Let's start putting hair on top of the head. How do we define these set pieces? Maybe some cool interactions. Maybe that midpoint is a really fun place to do the set piece. Maybe there's a cafeteria battle, or a like what I mentioned earlier with the stadium. Maybe there's a track and field battle or something of some sort with maybe some lesser liches or lesser ghost like villains of some sort, because combat is an integral part in this type of storytelling.
Oh yeah.
So maybe what kind of set pieces would you envision for a school like this?
Well, especially if we're talking about the midpoint, I think the characters cannot take on the Lich. Maybe if they're high level they can. But I think if you are playing a full power Lich and you have a low level party, I think the characters have to be undermining the Lich.
Correct.
So I think these are sessions where if you're going to have them in a cafeteria fighting a ghost, this ghost has to be some kind of lieutenant, or there has to be some kind of maybe rune carved somewhere in the cafeteria that they have to like destroy. And it could be the same thing for like the gym or the football field. Like they're constantly going through dismantling this Lich's hold on the world. Because the thing with the Lich is, oh my gosh, how did we forget this? Is that Liches have phylacteries, Liches have
I don't know what that means. I have no idea what that means.
Well, going to Harry Potter. So Voldemort, he had like the snake and these different things where if he dies, as long as these things he's tied his soul to remain, he can come back.
That's it.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And these kids,
that's it.
these kids know where the Lich's phylacteries are, and they're trying to lead you there so you can, destroy them. But the Lich obviously,
and those are your set pieces.
And the Lich,
and some of them are combat.
Exactly.
And some of them are mystery or searching or something like that.
Yep.
Man, that's so cool. I didn't even think about that.
I want to run this session right now, dude. I'm ready for it.
You know what? Anytime we do a filling in the gaps and we feel the desire to play it right away, I think we're on the right track.
Yep.
That's the biggest thing.
Yep.
So let's hop into creating NPCs, which I think is pretty fun because we can jump into some tropes that are relatively easy to fall into. I like the idea of like a gluttonous ghost sort of being in the cafeteria protecting one of the runes.
Yep.
Like you said, and this massive like ghost that sort of breaks apart itself to create a small army to fight for it.
Yeah.
As an idea.
Yep.
I'm not going to be able to have names. I always have a name list with me.
Me too.
Just to, and I would say that to any storyteller that's out there, you're going to have to create stuff on the fly at times. So having a name list with you is huge, and that lets you also be able to write down how does this guy sound if you like to do voices. I'm a big voice guy.
Me too.
Because for me, I could just picture the cafeteria monster sort of just being like, "You need to go and get these guys right over here."
Oh, that's
like,
so beautiful.
I sound
beautiful.
like such an idiot.
No, I think that's perfect though. That's like because it just has that like large blubbering like just gross feel that you
like
want.
its mouth is getting in the way of its own mouth is how I sort of feel. Yeah,
and like you have to go in there and like there's like all these pots and stuff, and the pots just start to shake, and then like the lids all shoot off. All of this, what appears to be food, but upon closer inspection is not, is just like forming together, like on the ground into a giant pile, and then
just a gelatinous mass of disgusting old food and just the epitome of gluttony in a lot of ways.
Yep.
That would be a cool one. What about like I'm obviously I'm an athlete, so sports is huge for me, but I like the idea of like a helpful coach. With like a whistle or like a very coach-like mentality that's almost like militaristic in his ways. Sort of screams at you, but in like a fun way, like a drill sergeant of sorts.
Okay, so would we introduce him during like if we're going to the gym or if we're going to, if we're heading outside to go to like a football field or a playground or something like that?
Absolutely. And what I always like to do with that, what I think would be fun, would be introduce him in a way that presents him in a light where he's being helpful. So maybe a few middling monsters, like middling ghost or something like that, pop up, and then he downs them quickly before the fight even starts.
Yep.
And then he could be like, those damn monsters out there. That's a terrible voice. Hey kids, the damn monsters out there are causing you trouble, huh? I got you. I don't know. Sounds like Batman if he was a terrible human being.
But like you could even I like the idea of him like just showing up and attacking these like zombies or ghosts as they're coming at you. I also, and this doesn't have to be the coach, it's just another idea. You could have someone who, if you're going to have this Lich, you have these very egomaniac guys who are obsessed, they're so perfect, they need to live forever. What happens? I mean, think back to like when you were in school, there were the teachers who didn't like each other. And what's the best way of getting back to someone? Like shackling them into this eternal torture. Maybe the coach is even a phylactery, and you have this moment where the players have to decide like, is this coach a bad guy? Is he telling the truth? If he's a phylactery, how do we end that spell on him? Is it something where we have to like have our wizard trying to cast the spell magic on him for several rounds of combat while we defend
Yeah.
the coach from all of these, like,
It could set up a really cool moment for the players to say goodbye to a character too.
exactly. Especially if
Maybe the phylactery contains them all, and knowing that they've learned about what they've learned through all the different characters they've met, they've realized that once they destroy this phylactery, even the ones that they care about, they're going to have to say goodbye to.
exactly. Yep.
That's a hugely powerful moment, especially if that character resonates with anybody. So that's a pretty cool thing. That would be a lot of fun. You also got to think the librarian would be a pretty key component character, the overseer of sorts, maybe the wise, knowledge based type of character as well. Mm-hmm. Sort of like the tutorial, like they go to her to find out she's the map of sorts.
Yeah. Well, I even like the idea too. So when you originally said the coach being the good helpful guy, I feel like a trope could be that you have this coach who's maybe this more aggressive character. He could be the bad guy, and then you have like the sweet old librarian who's like the good guy. I kind of like the idea of flipping that on its head and making this more aggressive guy the good guy. And then, I mean, if you think of like librarians are all about being quiet.
Right.
So you could have this whole encounter piece where you're in a library, or where like this kid ghost is mid talking to you and then just like gets deathly quiet and it's like,
yes,
like you gotta be quiet, like she's gonna hear you. And then you have this like eyeless librarian who like walks around the corner. Yeah, and she's like walking around like with her like finger like. You could either like she holds her finger up to her mouth. If you want to be extra creepy, you could have her finger sewn to her mouth or something like that.
Yeah.
And she's just like come around the corner looking for people.
Well, I actually just watched a Quiet Place.
Yeah. Yep.
Which it's a great movie, but they're blind, and the only way they can sense anything is through sound.
Yep.
And they're instantly deadly.
Yep.
Instantly deadly. And so we talk about dangerous things. Maybe one of those runes that they have to find is inside the library. And they see a ghost maybe wander in there and then instantly decimated by this librarian. Mm-hmm. And then one of the people can help them through it, and it's a sneak mission. I've never liked sneak missions in video games. I like to just load up that AK-47 and go to town.
Just go right in. Yep.
Yeah, but in this case, it could be a fun little sneaky type of thing that would be fun too. But yeah, I actually do think that's why I picked the coach as the good guy, because aggression is generally associated with negativity. But like for me, what if it is this like sort of unruly, crazy coach that's just like ready to help in any way possible? Yeah, I like that idea.
And especially talking about the stealth session again, that could be something where with this midpoint we have the perfect opportunity to let every character in your party kind of shine a little bit. And this library is the moment where like if you have this paladin or this barbarian, all loaded up in heavy armor, they're gonna clank on into that room and just have this thing immediately on them. Like I think even maybe be a little bit mean as a DM, and sure, your paladin's gonna be like, yeah, I want to make a stealth roll too. Just make them aware that like stealthy in like thin-fitting leather armor is different than stealthy in heavy armor. Even heavy armor even has a disadvantage on stealth. So, however, that doesn't mean that these heavy armor characters can't be supporting actors in this scene. Actually, another one of my friends up here, he just did a session the other day on stealth, and it was great because he had like all these tunnels. So you could do like tunnels of books that they have to go through, but he let us kind of see where the enemies were at, and then he this is kind of what we came up with, but the stealthy character was going to go and try to stealth, and the rest of us were going to like throw rocks or do things like that to kind of make sure,
the diversion.
Exactly, to make sure we couldn't sneak far in, because if we get stuck in the middle, we're screwed. But if
what about a Temple of Doom scenario where once they grab the item or destroy the item, all bets are off, and it's like a mad dash to get out of the room.
I like that. Yep. Especially because if you have these tunnels of books or bookshelves, especially because they got to be like spiraling out of control and looking all weird.
Right.
You could have this thing where as soon as you destroy that rune or whatever, you're bolting out there as quickly as you can, and in that moment you can now have these strong characters. Like you see the entrance is about to collapse, and now whether it's the wizard who has Pillar of Stone or whether it's the two beefcakes of the party, it's like, okay, I need you to make a strength check or else your friend is going to be caught in there.
Yeah,
and that way
and then it sets this scene in the mind where they spill out of the room as books pile behind them, and they all are sitting there completely covered in book dust and everything, and then the one character pulls out his hand and the rune is in his hand, and the successful thing has happened. It's those are the kind of moments that are so fun. That actually reminds me of mechanics, actually. So you did talk about ghost mechanics, but I like the idea of sort of a maze mechanic within a room like that.
Yeah.
What type of mechanics were you talking about with Ghost?
Oh, with the Ghost. So this is going way back to that classroom setting. But the Ghosts have a special action called Horrifying Visage, which just means they look scary. So essentially what it does is each non-undead creature within 60 feet who can see the ghost makes a saving throw, or they're frightened.
Oh, wow.
They're frightened for a minute. So that plays off that ghosts are scary. However, if you fail the saving throw by 5 or more, not only are you frightened, but you also
are petrified. Maybe.
Well, you actually age by 1d4 times 10 years. So going back to this is more of a flavor thing. I love just little flavor things. So you could have this teacher in the front of the room who is the ghost in that scenario, and you so all these kids are looking at you, the characters, and you're like freaking out at the kids. Then they look back at the teacher. The teacher's a straight up ghost. They look back at the kids, and the kids are these little, tiny tot bodies that just are wrinkled as all get out and still looking, and it's like, oh crap. So that could just be a cool way of doing that.
That's definitely a cool one for sure. I did a campaign one time where I did mine carts, and each of the mine cart lanes, I did 3 different lanes all running next to one another.
Yeah.
Each of the lanes affected, because this was the Western campaign, one lane affected how accuracy was. So it was like a bumpy lane, so it was harder to shoot in that lane, but it was but you were harder to hit.
Yeah.
And then the middle lane was not nearly as bumpy and pretty much average. And then one lane was easy. It was very smooth, but easy to hit, but easy to shoot at the same time.
Yep.
And so I thought of what could you do to maybe give that cost analysis type of thing for your players? Well, do I want to do this to give myself this ability or lean into this type of thing? And I thought, going back to the library scenario where you're running through this these almost like hallways created by these piles of books. What could you do in that regards that could make some fun stuff happen? Could you roll to determine which way they go, or what do you have a actual physical map that you're tracking them on in that realm, or what would you do in that sort of scenario?
I feel like what you could do, I would draw a map personally. Tight corridors, and then I would have the characters roll initiative, which is dangerous because that makes them think fighting. But for the most part, you're hoping it's just moving and doing whatever little side actions you want. And this is one of the moments where I would try to sand timer this. If you have a sand timer, or if you have a stopwatch or something.
Oh yes, create a physical manifestation of.
Because I think
Because
I think that's where stealth sessions can fail in D&D, is when it's just let's just sit here for 20 minutes before we even move. And just plot out these guys are probably going to go there, and these guys are probably going to go there. Whereas what you like in stealthing in video games is that tension of is this person going to turn around? Am I going to have to find a different route? And if you stick to a sand timer mode, that makes it where it is quick and it is rolling, and they don't have a lot of time to plan.
Right. Which it's fun, but at the same time, you do need, as a storyteller, you have to plan that.
Yes.
Because if you're going to make that any kind of thing that's not just a mess, you've got to plan it in ahead of time, just to make sure that you're not getting off track or missing stuff. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, man, honestly, let's grab our final thoughts. I think we have really fleshed this one out. I'm glad with the time on it, and I mean, honestly, what do you think? What was your favorite bits from what we just created out of this haunted school that we just did?
Man, I love that classroom scene, but I would have to say some other things I'm excited for is you could do some other things I would say for final thoughts is just continue to flesh out the extremes of what you remember about school. So, like, you have a janitor. What do janitors do? They clean. So you have this huge thing that just runs through the hallways to try to clean them of you. Or you have, like, these different teachers who represent different things, or a nurse who represents different things. Just continue, if you're looking for more things to fill out, give them extremes in a ghost scenario.
Yes.
What about you?
Yeah. To me, one of the things that really stuck out was the idea of that librarian. I like frightening, silent, bad things.
Yep.
I think that's a really, really cool idea. And this sort of floating, wears glasses that hang at the tip of this broken nose, and this long gangly fingers that are sharp at the end. It's to me, it's this really cool thing, and I love the idea of like an Indiana Jones, grab the rune, get out of there, books are tumbling behind you, you're doing everything you can to make it out, and you do, and you tumble out with the rest of your party, and there it is in your hand. That to me was a really cool moment. Maybe the coach as well have it, like the idea of the runes was also a really, really, really well done thing. I know it's straight from Harry Potter, but has it been used in other forms of medium before?
Well, I'm actually not sure.
Yeah.
I know I just
thought that was amazing.
It's just
you blew my
mind.
mind.
Oh yeah, it's just something that liches have is those phylacteries, and I think it makes sense if you're going to have this low level party where you have like they have to be collecting these things. And I know there's technically like rules for destroying a phylactery, but like
this is your game.
Exactly.
This is your story.
For the rule of fun, for the rule of fun, like let your players find these phylacteries and destroy them, or let your players find these phylacteries and then the ghost kids do something to destroy them. And as you collect them, then you go and you approach this lich, and as you go to fight him, the kids destroy these things one by one, which makes the lich enter a weaker state. If you're looking at your monster manual, a weaker lich could be, a specter, a wraith, a wight. But yeah, if you're throwing your level, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 party at a lich, it's going to be like turn 1, lich wins. So give them something.
Guys, I really took about 15 days to write up this story. I'm really excited. And you're gone.
And you're dead.
Everybody's dead.
Yep.
Yeah, everybody's dead.
Yep.
The biggest thing to remember is go out and have a good time.
Oh, yeah.
Rich, you always talk about this, but the rule of fun, just if it makes them have a wow moment, if it puts a memory in their mind, sometimes damn the rules. And that's fine. And there are people that are gonna be players that don't want to do that. Know your players, understand your party, and have fun with it. But just remember, at the end of the day, you're a storyteller, and you're gonna make sure that they are existing within that world, and that's all that matters. And so long as it's fun, the rest is history.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. And last thing I'll touch on, make sure when crafting a session like this that has all of these midpoints that could be so tailored that you do have that that show off moment for every character. Like give your rogue or your sneaky character the ability to be the one who sneaks through while the party helps him. Your fighters, they can shine in the cafeteria where you have this literal food and meat bag that they have to swing against as other people are trying to keep it from reforming. Have a library where your Arcana character gets to do something sweet, or a classroom setting where they're figuring something out. With all of these different classroom feels, you can really make sure that it's not just like, well, that one character who has the high level, damage spell where the crazy, swings 5 times did the thing again where they were always in the spotlight. And I guess if you do that, your characters, this has potential, I think, to be one of those sessions where people are like, do you remember that school?
It definitely has that memory kind of thing, and school even lends itself to just nostalgia in and of itself. So it's just a moment that I think we've created something very, very fun, and something that a lot of people can take stuff from. So I think that this is going to be awesome, and I would love to play this at one point.
I know, like, I'm going to go and seriously write this in right now. I'm ready for this to go.
Awesome, man.
Well, guys, that's the end of our first episode. We hope to have another one for you guys next week. Here's one last thing. We have, like we said, this list of 20 themes and 20 scenarios, and we are now one theme and one scenario short. We'd love you guys to give us ideas on themes and scenarios. Where are some places or some things that you would like to see us do for a theme, or some objectives for a scenario? We'd love to hear you guys' ideas on that.
Absolutely.
But we will leave you guys for this week. Hope you guys got some good fillers for the gaps in your story, and we will talk to you guys next time.
See you guys later.